Strobel, a member of the board of directors of the Greenville Chautauqua. Welcome to our Tuesday Greenville Chautauqua talk on Albert Einstein. First, I want to thank so much the library system for sponsoring this Tuesday Talks series. Please note that in the back of the room, the library staff have displayed relevant movies and books that are related to Albert Einstein. These items can be checked out, and we encourage you to do so. The library staff is always delighted to help you acquire a library card should you not have one. I also want to mention that it costs money to put on free shows. So if anyone would like to donate to Greenville Chautauqua, we are always delighted to accept your tax-deductible contribution of any amount. And in addition to financial assistance, Greenville Chautauqua is eager to have more volunteers to help us at our gatherings. If you are interested, you can sign up on a list on the information desk in the back, the lady there who's waving. Thank you for your help as a volunteer. So before we hear about Albert Einstein, let me tell you a little bit about Larry Bounds, our lecturer this evening. Larry has presented Albert Einstein for Chautauqua audiences since 2011. He has done so in South Carolina, North Carolina, Colorado, and Florida. A lot of parts of the U.S. He has also presented other Chautauqua programs since 2002, including Winston Churchill, Walt Disney, Walter Cronkite, and Harry Houdini for audiences across the country. Now you might say, well, is this Larry's main job? Larry has a bachelor's degree from the University of Tennessee and an MS in English education. He is National Board certified with 35 years of classroom teaching experience, including many years as an advanced placement instructor. He has been honored as Wade Hampton High School's Teacher of the Year, and in 2019 was named as one of upstate South Carolina's most influential educators. Larry is also a member of Mensa, which things to me works well talking about Albert Einstein. This is, of course, the High IQ Society, and Larry serves as the executive on the executive committee of his regional Mensa chapter. He is also chair and artistic director of the Greenville Chautauqua Board of Directors. We are so grateful for his dedication to this organization. So please give him a very warm welcome and learn about Albert Einstein.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, we are not in costume, dressed as, performing as Einstein. We'll be doing that. I'll be doing that this summer. I'll be the very public Einstein this summer, talking about his public issues, his scientific endeavors, the successes, the failures, his efforts to achieve international peace, his efforts to achieve the state of Israel, all the things he did in the public life. When you see Houdini on stage, he will be very unlikely to talk about most of the things I'm talking about tonight. I said Houdini? Well, I've done him too. So Einstein is kind of a Houdini. Anyway, tonight we're going to be looking at Einstein. I'll have to work on that. We're going to be looking at Einstein's private life, the things that on the Chautauqua stage in character he probably wouldn't have mentioned. And if you had asked him questions in the question and answer portion, he probably would have evaded the questions. But in our venue, perfect, no evasion, we'll get right to the story, looking at his family, his close nuclear family, looking at his relationships that helped shape his life and make him the greatest superstar scientist of the 20th century. And like Houdini is the iconic magician, even though he's been gone for 100 years, Einstein is still today the and they're friends. Nothing special, but they're cousins, first cousins and friends. Well, actually, she's more than first cousin because her father is the first cousin of Albert Einstein's father. Her mother is the sister of Albert Einstein's mother. So Elsa is a close family relation. She is his second cousin through his father and his first cousin through his mother. It's a close family. What can I say? Anyway, so here's Albert's nuclear family. As time passes on, when Albert is only 2 years old, the family moves to Munich, and father quits selling beds. There. A bit older pictures of the nuclear family there. Can you guys see okay? Can you see? Okay. There's Herman. Herman joins his younger brother Jacob to form Einstein Electric. They have factories that build dynamos and electrical meters, switches, wiring, and Herman's the salesman and Jacob is the electrical engineer. Albert Einstein, from the time he's 2 or 3, is growing up playing in the factory with all the equipment, all the wonderful electrical toys. When he's just a little boy, he is given a compass. He thinks the compass is the most amazing thing he had ever seen. Think of it, a needle that always points to the north. No matter how you turn it, it knows where north is. There's sealed inside a glass and metal box, but it knows what is the force that enters that box and turns that needle and makes it point. What invisible force is shaping the universe? Einstein, the little boy, is fascinated by this, trying to see the invisible world that moves and shapes the world we live in. Ooh, this is great. Well, playing with all those electrical devices and switches and electricity. In Munich, Oktoberfest is able to be presented under the lights at night for the very first time, wired by the Einstein Electric Company. It's fabulous success. There's only one problem. To be truly successful, they need to be able to wire the entire city of Munich, right? Light up southern Germany. They have the same problem that in America, Thomas Alva Edison has. You see, all of their dynamos and all of their meters and all of their electrical devices run on DC direct current. The competition runs on AC, alternating current, which is easier for transmitting over long distances without all the battery backups and everything. DC is great to run your car, but you don't want your house running on DC current. So they lose the contract to light up Munich. So the father takes the family and moves to Switzerland, hoping they can light up Switzerland. And after a year, he realizes we're not going to have any more luck than we had in Munich. Let's move to Italy. So they move to Italy. Einstein stays behind in Switzerland to continue his education. His sister is going to move to Italy, and then eventually his sister will move back to Switzerland to continue her education. The father really fails and dies of heart failure at the age of 55, leaving Pauline a widow with a daughter. Pauline ends up moving in with her older sister, lives with her for quite a few years, works as a housekeeper just to, make money, have an income. Her daughter has moved on to college. She's working towards her teaching degree. Her son is working to his degrees in physics and eventually a doctorate. Well, Maja has moved in with the Wendler family in Switzerland. In the middle of the picture, we have Jost Wendler, one of her professors, and his wife, and their 3 daughters and their son Paul. And over in the corner of the picture, waving at everybody, that's Maja. Waving hello. Hello, everybody, this is Maja. And she's going to study for her teaching certificate. She's going to continue to her advanced studies. She's going to study in Berlin. She's going to study in Paris. She's going to return to Bern, Switzerland, and complete her degree at Bern and get her teaching certificate. And then a year later, she's going to marry Paul. And she loses her teaching certificate. Why does she lose her teaching certificate? Because at that year, women who get married are not allowed to teach school. Why? Because they might get pregnant. And you can't allow such obscene activity around the presence of small children. That was the law in America too, by the way. If you're a man, you could teach, but then the chance of you having a pregnancy was very low. All right, so there's Maja. We'll come back to Maja. Oh, I should mention, while she's in Switzerland, in the city of Aarau, when she's in Aarau, Einstein comes to Aarau as well and is also taking classes there in the city of Aarau, Switzerland. And he meets her family, and his eye catches Marie. Marie is down here in the corner with the big smile in her hand like this. She's a cutie. And he becomes really infatuated with Maria. And Marie is not at all fascinated with Einstein, the sort of nerdy older brother of her friend, Maya. So that doesn't work out. Marie is going to always be the girl who got away, the great love that was not to be. He does, however, find love. Back in 1896, when he's attending college, he meets Mileva Maric. She's from Austria-Hungary, the part of Austria-Hungary now known as Serbia. She's from a wealthy Serbian family. She was the only female student in advanced studies in Serbia in a school for boys that, because of her excellence in math and physics and science, was allowed to study with the boys. And she is offered the only college position in Switzerland studying math and studying physics. Everybody else is a boy that's there. She's the only girl in Einstein's classes. And they know each other for several years. But then Einstein falls in love with Marie. Marie breaks his heart. Well, actually, I don't know how she could break his heart since she hardly knew him, but that's how it goes. So he returns and falls madly in love with Mileva because she's there. And so they have a baby girl. Now, you guys are hearing right now that in 1902, in January, Mileva gave birth to a baby boy, a baby girl named Lisserl. We only found out about Lisserl, this is the private life, we only found out about Lisserl in the 1980s. Yeah, Lisserl is a great mystery. This book cover, which I got as big as I could, at the very bottom there's a little red circle. This is Mileva's home in Serbia. On the front porch, there is what might be the figure of a woman holding a baby with a small white dog in front of her. You can barely see it, though I tell you, I have this book. If you were holding the book in your hand, you couldn't really see the woman and the dog and the baby, but sort of. It's not the sharpest, clearest telephoto picture of any kind, right? But that's supposed to be maybe Mileva, maybe her mother, holding little girl Lisserl. We found out about it because there were letters that Einstein had written to Mileva when she dropped out of school and went back home to Serbia to have the baby because she wasn't married. Oh. So there's a conversation between them in a series of letters where Einstein writes, well, I hope our baby is a little Hanserl, which means a little Hans. And she writes that she hopes it'll be a little Lisserl, which is a little Lissa. Lissa's short for Elizabeth. So she's hoping for a baby girl. He's hoping for a baby boy. They're both college students. It's a baby girl. There are a few more letters, and in the last letter ever written that mentions Lisserl, Einstein writes, concerned about the fact that the baby has contracted scarlet fever. There is no other mention of Lisserl ever, and nobody knows about Lisserl from that point until the 1980s, after which there's a couple of authors who've written books about Einstein's daughter, but nobody knows. Possibly when she was less than a year old, she died of scarlet fever. Possibly she was adopted. A single mother put up the baby for adoption. The second book written about Lisserl says that Maleva's best friend was named Helene, and the letters indicate that the baby was born with some kind of a congenital malady. And her friend Helene, at the same time, had a baby that was born blind, but her baby grew up, would go on to have children, have grandchildren, didn't die until the 1990s when she was in her own 90s. And when the book came out suggesting that that blind girl was actually Einstein's daughter, that woman's grandchildren, who were still alive when the book came out, said, no, we know the story of our grandmother. She is not the daughter of Einstein. So most scholars follow that she probably died of scarlet fever. Anyway, we know that after Lisserl vanishes off the face of the earth, no one would have asked Einstein a question about Lisserl because nobody knew until those letters came out. His granddaughter released the letters that she found in her father's papers. So in January, a year after the baby is born, the two of them are married and begin their life together. Married in 1903, all right? He, in 1902, became a patent clerk. He couldn't get a job as a teacher. The reason he could not get a job as a teacher is because when he was a student, he refused to do things the way the teachers told him to do them. He did them his own way. In his laboratory classes, for those who've had college lab classes, you buy the lab manual, you have all the equipment there, you follow the steps in the lab manual, you put down your results, and you're graded on whether your results match what the correct answer is from doing the lab experiment. The graduate students who worked as lab assistants complained about Albert Einstein. They said he wouldn't follow the lab manual. He would come up with other ways to do the same experiment. And the professor said, well, then just mark his wrong answers wrong. And they said, but that's the problem. He's finishing the lab in half the time and he gets the right answer. Professors hated that. His elementary school, his high school teachers in the gymnasium, they hated that. When he finally graduates with his teaching degree and he's trying to get recommendations from his top instructors, no one will give him a teaching recommendation because he's this obstinate kid who won't follow the rules and do things the way we tell them to. And so he can't get hired as a teacher. He tries doing some tutoring, but a friend of his has a father who works in the Swiss government. When Einstein had moved to Switzerland and his family had moved on to Italy, leaving him behind in Switzerland, he had renounced his German citizenship. Now, it's not because he was super patriotic Swiss. It's because if he had kept his German citizenship, there was required compulsory military training. And he wanted nothing to do with military training. I mean, a guy who doesn't follow instructions is not who you want to have in military training. And he applied for citizenship in Switzerland. It takes him 5 years to get citizenship in Switzerland, but he does finally become an official Swiss citizen. And having become a Swiss citizen, he is appointed to the lowest level job of a clerk examiner level 3, bottom of the basement, in the patent office of Swiss patent office. His job is to take a stack of papers and read through these requests for patents, analyze previous patents related to these patents to see if this is truly original work or if it's simply a fairly simple variation of something that somebody else has a patent on, and then write up his report. And he loves this job because he can go through a big stack of papers in half of a workday and do all his reports and spend the other half of the day sitting at his desk, looking out the window, watching the trolley cars pass, thinking, now, if I was moving in the trolley car and I dropped an orange, even though I'm moving, the orange falls straight down. It doesn't fall backwards. what's going on? By the way, that's the basic observation that leads to the theory of relativity and the fact that time and space are connected and move at different speeds in different times and places. But we won't get into that today. Wait till Einstein's here. He'll explain it all to you. But he's sitting there as a patent clerk. He's also having a chance to do his own private research. He's fascinated by light and what light is. He's fascinated by this problem called Brownian motion. Why particles in suspension in a glass of water vibrate and move. What gives them the energy to vibrate and move? Like why the compass moves. Why does those particles move? His brain is thinking. He's doing thought experiments, trying to figure it out by proposing various experiments in his head. And while he's sitting at his desk, having finished his day's work, and he's writing up papers. And in 1905, he's now been married for 3 years. He's got a son. We'll get to him on the next slide. But in 1905, that's his miracle year. He publishes, about every 3 months, he publishes another research paper in one of Germany's most prestigious physics journals. The first paper is about what is the nature of light, and can light be used to actually generate electricity? Oh, think solar panels, okay? But if you know what light is, that light is actually energy, can you convert that energy into a different energy? And then the next paper is about Brownian motion and what makes those little particles move in a glass of still water. And he determines that it's because the atoms are moving. Now, only half of the scientists in modern physics in 1905 even believe atoms exist. It's considered an on-the-edge theory. His paper proves that atoms exist and solves one of the old problems in physics, proving atoms. In fact, he even, using a mental experiment, calculates the size of atoms, which when we were able to finally actually accurately scientifically measure them, he was really close. So he does that in his second paper, proves the existence of atoms. In the third paper, he talks about relativity, the special relativity, and how time moves at different speeds at different places. And then for his last paper, he writes about how matter is actually a form of energy. That energy, just like we have water vapor that can be liquid water, or it can be solid water. Energy can be energy, or it can be solid matter, or it can be plasma, or it can be, later he'll come up with Bose-Einstein condensate, which is a different form of matter. But anyway, he writes these 4 papers over the course of 1905, and he becomes, across Europe, instantly one of the most well-known scientists in the world. Well, in Europe. It's going to take another 10 years to be in the world. But this is a big year. Now, he, in 1904, the year before this, so when he's writing all these papers, he's got a 1-year-old. I mean, think about it, writing all that work with a 1-year-old in the house? Oh, my goodness. 10 years, in 1910, he's going to have his second son born. Edward is his favorite. The little Edward is the one he says that shares his nature. He is a thinker like Einstein is. He predicts great things. Hans is a good kid, but Edward, that's the special one. That's the one close to his heart. However, by 1905, 1906, he's writing letters to Marie, back the Ventler family, telling her that he thinks his marriage to Mileva may have been misguided. And that, of course, he's going to have another child in a couple of years, but misguided, that if only he had married Marie, he would be truly happy. He's very dissatisfied. I'm going to pull out some notes for this one because the details on this one are amazing. Around the time that he's becoming quite famous, he writes a set of rules for his wife. Anybody ever seen Young Sheldon or the and also in The Big Bang Theory and Sheldon, where Sheldon loves to write rules, contracts? Well, you know, he was a big fan of Einstein, right? Einstein was a contract writer. So he writes All right. Your opinions of Einstein may suffer a slight jostle here. About a year before Edward is born, he writes a contract that says to Mileva, "You will see that my clothes and linen are kept in order and that I am served 3 regular meals a day in my room. You will renounce all personal relations with me except when these are required to keep up social appearances. Specifically, forego my sitting with you at home or my going out or traveling with you. You will obey. You will expect no intimacy from me. You will not reproach me in any way. If I request it, you will stop talking to me. If I request it, you will leave my study or bedroom immediately. And by words or behavior, you will not belittle me in front of our children." Now, any of you ladies in the audience, if your husband presented you with this mandate, I'm sure you would say, "Well, gee, I'll happily sign that." No. Well, she did. She agreed. She was willing to keep the family together, even if it meant giving in to, shall we be kind and say, eccentricity? All right? And Edward does come along, you know, they do have the children. In 1915, he is going to publish his general theory of relativity. This is a big deal. This changes everyone's basic concept on the structure and functioning of the universe. And he proposes an experiment that will prove it exists. That light, when it travels through space, that space and time itself is bent, and light travels along the bent line of space and time, bent by gravity. Once again, I'm not going to get into the details tonight. But there is a test, a photograph that you can take at a special time from a special place that would prove it. When the sun is in eclipse, and you know there's a star behind it, and you know where the star is, and you know that the sun's in front of it, but if you take your picture, you'll see the light of the star has veered around the sun, which you wouldn't see if the sun was bright, but you will see it if the sun is eclipsed. And you would have the star that's here is going to be in the photograph over here. And that will prove that light bends with gravity. And finally, they tried to take this picture in 1915, but there was this annoying thing called World War I that was going on. And the English scientists who tried to take the picture got arrested by German soldiers. So that didn't work. But in 1919, when the war was over, they took the picture. And it was right. And Einstein was proven correct. And he became an international sensation because he had proven a theory about space and time and gravity that was proven correct. Meanwhile, back in 1911, he's attending these huge scientific conferences. Over on the right is another scandalous human being, her name Marie Curie. Why is Marie Curie scandalous? Well, in 1906, I'll stretch my legs here. In 1906, Marie Curie's husband, and they've won the Nobel Prize in physics for their work in radiation, detecting and showing radiation. Her husband is walking home one night along the sidewalk, along the street in Paris. It has been raining. The street is wet. He steps, he slips, he falls underneath a wagon that is going by and is crushed to death. Yeah, the end of Mr. Curie in 1906. However, they have a lab assistant who is going to become a very prestigious scientist in France himself. This lab assistant's 5 years younger than Marie Curie. They've been working together for years. The lab assistant is married. He has 4 children and an unhappy marriage. And in 1910, he and his wife separate and he moves into his own apartment, also known as the Paris Love Nest. Marie Curie, age 43, and Perrine, age 38. A younger man with an older woman. Now, notice no one complained about the 29-year-old marrying the 18-year-old, but a 43-year-old Marie Curie who's single, a widower, meeting the separated and meeting with, oh, this is a scandal. So while they're all at this conference, Marie Curie is the only woman at the table. These are the greatest physicists of the early 20th century, all gathered in one picture, the Solvay Conference in Brussels, Belgium. Marie is sitting at the table towards the right with her hand resting on her elbow. Next to her is Poincare, the scientific philosopher that was one of the great inspirations for Einstein's early work himself. And behind Poincare, there's Albert Einstein. And beside Albert Einstein is Perrine, the lab assistant boyfriend. When Marie returns, the wife has sent a detective who has stolen papers from the lab or from the house, and it has become a huge scandal. Marie Curie in a love nest with a younger man. She arrives home in Paris, and there is a mob gathered around her house. Now, in her house is her 14-year-old daughter and her 7-year-old daughter. Scared out of their minds because there's a protesting mob protesting this Jewish seductress. Suddenly, the Roman Catholic Polish woman becomes Jewish. It's a thing, right? The Jewish seductress has lured and broken up. She's a marriage breaker. The fact that they were already separated for some time, that doesn't matter. So Albert Einstein, who himself, remember I mentioned Elsa, the cousin, the first cousin and second cousin, who's had 2 daughters. And I'm afraid in like 1910 she had a son, but he only lived a month and passed away. So she has 2 daughters. Older than his kids. He has begun going to Berlin now and then and visiting his cousin Elsa. And they have started an affair. And he hears about this story about Marie Curie, and he writes Marie Curie a famous letter. This is Einstein responding to a sex scandal with Marie Curie. Highly esteemed Mrs. Curie, do not laugh at me for writing without having anything sensible to say. But I am so enraged by the base manner in which the public is presently daring to concern itself with you that I absolutely must give vent to this feeling. However, I am convinced that you consistently despise this rabble, whether it obsequiously lavishes respect on you or whether it attempts to satiate its lust for sensationalism. I am impelled to tell you how much I have come to admire your intellect, your drive, and your honesty, and that I consider myself lucky to have made your personal acquaintance in Brussels, right here in the picture over here. Anyone who does not number among these reptiles is certainly happy, now as before, that we have such personages among us as you and Langevin. That's the guy's name, Langevin. Perrine is actually, I think, a lab assistant. Sorry. Langevin. 2, real people with whom one feels privileged to be in contact. If the rabble continues to occupy itself with you, then simply don't read that hogwash, but rather leave it to the reptile for whom it has been fabricated. With most amiable regards to you, Langevin and Perrine, yours very truly, A. Einstein. By the way, on my computer, when I typed A. Einstein, it started putting everything in A, B, 1, 2, 3 lists. And I couldn't make it stop until I typed Albert. Anyway, that's a problem I had. So that's a very supportive response to someone in that situation. I also have his private, personal response. He said to a friend, talking about Marie Curie at the same time, she has a sparkling intellect, but despite her passionate nature, she's not attractive enough to represent a threat to anyone. Okay, so on we move. Here are the kids. Edward, he called Tete, that means basically little one, Tete, and Hans Albert, the 2 of them. And they're walking. Remember, they're raised in Switzerland. They're enjoying life there. And he's back now with Elsa and her 2 daughters. Her 2 daughters, one of them's 20, one of them's 18. The older one is Ilse. Ilse, daughter of Elsa. There she is. Best picture I could find ever on a sailboat, sitting there. And then here's Margot sitting in Einstein's lap several years later. It's all perfectly acceptable, though. The hands in the corner of the picture are his sister's hands. So they're there. It's a family event. They're all gathering. Just Margot happens to be in Einstein's lap. When he finds her, he has an affair with, of course, Elsa, the mother. And apparently, Elsa's family, his aunt and his uncle, want them to get married. Well, Mileva has moved to Berlin with the kids and discovered he's having an affair with Elsa, and she packs up the kids and moves back to Switzerland. 1915, 1916, 17, time rolls on. 5 years before they can work out they're separated and they're working out the terms of their divorce. But they are going to get a divorce. Mileva is going to divorce Einstein. But they have to come to a deal. And the deal is, when they finally divorce, when Einstein wins the Nobel Prize, he gets the Nobel Prize, she gets the cash. The cash at the time, and he wins it finally in 1921, not for E equals MC squared, not for special or general relativity. He wins the Nobel Prize for the photoelectric effect, which is going to lead to taking energy from sunlight, okay? Which is pretty useful, right? The prize is $28,000. All the money in 1921, actually presented in 1922, but the money goes to Mileva back in Bern, Switzerland. I looked up how much $28,000 in 1921 is in 2025 money. It would be just under $500,000. She takes the money, she buys an apartment complex, she has a place for her and the kids to live, and she gets rental income from all the other tenants. She was good at math, all right? So, he's going to marry Elsa. But a month before he's going to marry Elsa, he approaches Ilse, who's 20, and says, I have a relationship with your mother. Your grandparents are really sort of forcing us to get married, but I would really rather marry you. How about it? She's been working as his secretary. She says, I really think of you more as a father figure. He is 41, she's 20. And so, that doesn't work out. And he does marry Elsa. 1919, as soon as the divorce is ready, he marries Elsa. Elsa is the perfect wife for him. She believes that a man with special genius has to exert his specialness in many ways, and that the wife shouldn't be critical of how he exerts his energy. And so the entire time they are married, she gets to travel the world. They come to America, they go to Asia, they travel Japan, they meet the emperor, they meet kings and royalty, they come to America, they go to the White House together. She loves it. Do you always see pictures of Elsa? And isn't there a family relationship with his first/second cousin, right? They do get along great. And so it goes. And the entire time that he is with her, he is having an incredible number of affairs. He is sleeping with a friend's niece. He is sleeping with another friend's sister. He has, I think I jotted a list of some of the people. Let's see. Over the next 13 years, a married Austrian named Margaret, a rich florist named Estelle, a wealthy widow named Tony. But over a whole 13-year period was one of his wife's best friends, Ethel, a Berlin socialite. He became really he wrote to Elsa, his wife Elsa, he wrote to her several times about how he was getting really annoyed with Ms. M, the good friend, because apparently he wrote letters to his wife about his relationships with all these. Remember, this is Europe at the turn of the century. This is not uncommon behavior. Think about Victorian England, where it was the most common thing in the world to have affairs left and right. In our puritanical America, we frown upon such things. But apparently in Europe, they were being very European, I guess. So, but she puts up with it. I had some select quotes. Such a genius should be irreproachable in every respect, Elsa said. So there's no reason to bring. And Einstein had no problem with that position. 1936, Elsa dies. This is the only time many of Einstein's friends say they ever see him shed a tear. She is diagnosed in 1935 with a heart and kidney disease, probably caused by high blood pressure. And because of that, she's bedridden. Her condition goes downhill for a year. Her daughter Ilse, by the way, had died a year before that in Paris of tuberculosis. The wife had gone over to be with her daughter as she died of tuberculosis. And then she returned home, and then she was diagnosed, and the next year she's dying. Einstein had a really hard, he really had a closeness after all these years with Elsa. In fact, and this is really sad, but Elsa made the comment because of his attention and the obvious caring he was showing in her final illness. She is quoted as having said, "I never knew he loved me so much." Yeah. So she passes away. And in 1938, his son, who is now grown, has a wife and two sons himself, Bernard and Klaus Martin, Hans Albert and Klaus Martin. This is a picture of them arriving. I don't know, it's courtesy of Getty Images, and it's the son has the hat on, and Einstein you can probably recognize. And I don't know who the tall guy is in front, but the two boys, little Klaus Martin is down there between the parents' legs. The back of his wife is there, Frida, and then there's his son Hans, and then Bernard is over here with the luggage. I don't know if they're arriving in America. I don't know if they're arriving in Greenville, but Hans leaves Switzerland because of the coming of the war. 1939, he's in Switzerland, but Europe is now in war, and he moves the family here for safety. Einstein moved here in 1933 when Hitler took over. As soon as Hitler took over, he was on a tour of America. They stayed, didn't go back. Hans Albert works for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. His specialty is hydrology. He is going to become the world's leading expert on soil erosion and soil transport and water. And he comes to Greenville and lives here for 5 years, where he is working with Clemson University and their agriculture department, testing the waters, seeing where erosion is a problem, seeing ways to prevent the erosion, control the loss of soil and all that here in the Greenville area, here in the upstate. Einstein will catch the train in Princeton because when he moves to America, he gets a seat at Princeton University where he doesn't have to do any teaching. He can just think a great deal, and he loves that job. And he would get on the train in Princeton, and he would come to Greenville, and he'd get off at the station downtown, walk just a few blocks north, and his son lived just about a block or two away from where WYFF studios are now. I had a rental house there with him and his wife and his two children. His wife is pregnant with the third child, who will be a boy. They're going to name him David. 1939, however, little Klaus Martin Einstein, age 5, just a few days from being 6, is very ill. His mother has hesitated taking him to the doctor. He'll get over it. You know, he's a little boy. Little boys get sick. but he's getting sicker and sicker. And so they finally agree to take him to the Greenville Hospital, where he's tested and diagnosed with advanced diphtheria. And he dies in the Greenville Hospital. And though he never made it to 6, he became a permanent Greenville resident because he was the second human being ever buried in Woodlawn Cemetery, right across the street from the Red Lobster. In the U section, right as you first go in the gate. That's it, Einstein. And his gravestone says, Klaus Martin Einstein, from March 15th of 33 to January the 5th of 1939, son of Dr. and Mrs. Hans Albert Einstein, grandson of Albert Einstein. Before the year is over, she will give birth to the baby David. The baby David will only live a month, and then he'll also die. So it's a very sad time. Einstein did wander the streets of Greenville. I told you about him getting lost and being found and taken back to his house. But he would. There was another Einstein, a student at Furman, who was living here, and he looked in the phone book and he saw that a new Einstein had moved into the neighborhood. So he called him up, Hans Albert, and said, "Hi, my name is Einstein too. Could we be related?" And he said, "Well, my father's coming down. He knows all the relatives. When he comes, I'll invite you over. We'll have dinner. You can talk to my father." And, of course, when he meets the father's Albert Einstein. Oh, my goodness. And they compare notes, and it turns out they were like second or third cousins or something. Anyway, so the boy says, "Would you mind speaking to my class at Furman?" "Oh, sure, I'll do it." And he'd go down, and he'd teach classes at Furman. And when Einstein showed up on campus, they would call the classes to a close, and everyone would go to the auditorium, and they'd hear a lecture by Einstein. Because who would want to pass that up, right? So he had some times here in Greenville. And, of course, he picked up another girlfriend. Princeton hired a sculptor. I got to speed this up. Princeton hired a sculptor to come and make a bronze bust. The Rodin of Russia. His name was Sergei Konenkov. And Sergei Konenkov was married to Margarita Konenkova. And so he comes, and Einstein is posing, and he meets the lovely Margarita. Margarita, by the way, in the true European tradition, has already had affairs with Rachmaninoff and some other famous Russian composers. So you probably won't believe this, but yes, Einstein ends up with an affair with Margarita Konenkova. She was an inspiration for art for her husband. There's a picture of her as a young woman and some of the statuary that her husband made. And the other one over here is the bust of Einstein that Konenkov made. Apparently, he didn't object to the affairs. And in the 1980s or 90s, the head of Russian intelligence published a book in which he revealed that Margarita was a Soviet agent and that she was encouraged to get close to Einstein as a spy, and that she also developed a friendship through Einstein with J. Robert Oppenheimer. And she encouraged J. Robert Oppenheimer to pick certain students to work on his atomic bomb project who were known to be very left-wing students, very liberal students, because they felt that maybe if they were very liberal students, if they were approached by Stalin's agents, they would be more likely to be turned into useful sources of information. And so all this is going on during the building of the nuclear bombs. And we do know that the Soviets had spies within the program because they're going to come up with their own nuclear bombs shortly afterwards using the material they got harvested from the Manhattan Project. Well, perhaps part of it came from the work done by Margarita. I know she and her husband were exiled from the country in 1944. And she went back where she was placed on a government pension, and there's a picture of them young, and then there's a picture of them quite elderly, continuing to live together for the rest of their lives, happily married afterwards. Of course, Einstein is not married at this time. Einstein's first wife is still alive. She lives until 1948. And in 1940, Einstein arranges for a little girl to be adopted. Remember, his son Hans Albert had 3 sons, and 2 of his 3 sons are dead in 1939. So in 1941, he gives him the opportunity to adopt a little girl, and they bring this newborn into the family. They name her Evelyn. Years later, Evelyn is going to be responsible for finding a lot of the letters. Margot, the stepdaughter, is also going to find some 3,000 pages of letters written by Einstein. Evelyn finds some papers written by Einstein as well. And she also reports that when she was still young, her parents explained to her that the truth is, while Hans Albert and Frida, his wife, were her adopted parents, her actual parents were Albert Einstein and a Chicago ballerina. Now, do we know this to be true? No, we do not. There was no DNA testing common at that time. No one took samples from Hans, or no one took samples from Evelyn. Evelyn wrote books about Einstein. Evelyn had an interesting career herself, but we'll get to that. This is Albert's sister. She is going to rejoin him in 1939 when the war breaks out. She's living in Italy. When she married Paul Vintler, he was an artist. She, like her mother, Pauline, was a pianist. Pauline taught Einstein how to play the piano and encouraged him at the age of 5 to take violin lessons. And he played the violin and played the piano his whole life. In fact, some of his great theories, according to Elsa, came from him sitting at the piano, playing, thinking, playing, and then the general theory of relativity. I've got it! Dun, 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 dun. Anyway, his sister comes to America. They won't let her husband Paul in because of health conditions. So he had some health, I don't know if it's tuberculosis or heart disease or whatever, but they wouldn't let him in. So he left their home in Italy and he moved in with his family back in Switzerland. She came to America and she moved in with her brother in 1939. She is going to live with him until her own death in 1951, I believe. She's planning, when the war ends, to go back to her husband Paul. But in 1945, she has a stroke. And she's diagnosed with advanced arteriosclerosis. And she becomes bedridden. And for the next 5 years, she's going to be bedridden in Einstein's home, suffering from that. And she will have a fall, which breaks her upper arm, and the broken upper arm is going to lead to pneumonia, and that's going to eventually kill her in 1951. So a very sad tale about her. And she never gets a chance to join her husband. And he dies a year after her death. So they're not reunited. His final illness for Einstein, okay, we're pretty good on time, I guess. Final illness, he, in 1948, was diagnosed with an aortic aneurysm. And he undergoes surgery to reinforce the aortic aneurysm so that it won't rupture and he won't bleed out internally. But they said eventually it's going to weaken and you're going to have this problem again. And sure enough, 7 years later, he develops a leak in the aorta. And they rush him to the hospital. And they say, Dr. Einstein, we can do surgery, but if we do surgery, if you're 76 years old, there's only a 50-50 chance that you'll survive the surgery. And he says, I want to go when I want. It is tasteless to prolong life artificially. I have done my share. It is time to go. I will do it elegantly. And with that, he says his goodbyes, and overnight, early the next morning, he passes away from the aortic aneurysm. Thus ends the life, the somewhat exotic, and dare I say erotic, life of Albert Einstein. Though his story doesn't end there, no, because Einstein, after this, is going to be autopsied. And the doctor who performs the autopsy is going to collect souvenirs. He is going to take both of Einstein's eyes, and give them as a gift to Einstein's ophthalmologist, what every ophthalmologist wants. And he will also, with the permission of the family, collect Einstein's brain, which he will take 14 detailed photographs of for the structure of the brain. And then he will cut it into 240 cubic centimeter size blocks, wrapped in plastic and stored in alcohol in a couple of large mason jars held in a wooden box, often transported in the back of his car, sometimes left in the bathroom in his house. No one knows that because the body itself is cremated, the ashes spread in an undisclosed location. Einstein wanted no site that would be like a memorial, people come to do homage, and he didn't want any of that. But the brain continued on. And it was not until 1978 that anybody knew that Einstein's brain was cut up into little pieces in a jar, or cut 2 jars in a wooden box. I think it was a peach box. May have been a bleach box. Anyway, whatever. But a guy cross country with the guy who did the autopsy, and he told him all about it, and the brain was back in the trunk of the car because they were delivering some samples to a researcher, a neuro researcher in Canada that would get a few pieces to experiment with. And so in 1978, a book was written about taking a road trip with Einstein's brain. In the early 2000s, the guy died and passed the brain on to his descendants, who then gave it to like the National Museum of Science and Health. And so it is now in the custody of this museum, where they have done research on it. Early reports said that it had an unusual number of cells, but more recent studies have said actually it was towards the high end of normal. It wasn't really out of the curve of what they would expect for the number of cells. There was a crease, and I forget the exact name of this crease in the side of the brain. His crease was shorter than most people's creases was. So the brain was closer together there than it is in a lot of people, and they don't know if that had any effect on his ability to do what he did, but that's still under consideration. But so it goes with Einstein's body and brains. Final thoughts. We haven't really talked about this guy. Anybody know who that is? That's Edward, the second son, the one that was his favorite, the one that was as talented as he was, the one that wrote poetry and wanted to be a doctor, particularly a psychiatrist. And he went off to college. And when he was 20 years old, he began to behave erratically, was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and was institutionalized. Yeah. During the time he was institutionalized by his brother, Hans Albert, he says damage was done using electroshock therapy and the drugs they were using to try to control the mental illness. And he lost his ability to retain facts for any long period of time, to be able to concentrate. And he returned and lived with his mother in her apartment, occasionally having episodes that would require him to be reinstitutionalized. And when she died in 1948, he was permanently committed to an institution where he lived out his life until at the age of 55, he died of a stroke. Okay? That's little Tay-Tay. There is Hans Albert. Hans Albert leaves Greenville and goes to California, where he works for the California Institute of Technology. And then he's offered a full professorship at the University of California, Berkeley, where he serves out the rest of his career. He literally writes the book on soil science and hydrology and soil transport. The classic textbook is his. He's attending at the age of 78. His wife Frida passes away in the mid-1950s. A year later, he marries one of his fellow professors from Berkeley. And when he's 78 years old, they are attending a conference in Massachusetts, a scientific conference, and he dies of a heart attack at the conference. But he has one son and one daughter. The son is Bernard, the little boy with the suitcase we saw earlier. Bernard excels in German in school, because, of course, he was raised the first 5 or 6 years in Germany, and his family spoke German, but not much anything else. He joins the military, and he serves a term in the U.S. military. And then he decides to go back to college, and he decides to go to the college where his grandfather graduated and his father graduated. So he went back to ETH, and he graduates with a degree in engineering. And he has since then developed several patents on light amplification. In fact, the night vision goggles contain some of his inventions that make them able to see in the dark. He also developed light amplification systems that have improved lasers. And so he did quite well. He has also passed away. And then finally, his adopted sister, who may have been his aunt. See, it gets confusing. Cousins, second cousins. Is it my aunt? Are you my dad, or are you my half brother? You know, anyway. So Evelyn has the most interesting and closing remark here, the most unusual history yet. Evelyn, a child of the 50s and 60s, in 1964, she is going to marry, here she is in 1964-ish, and she's going to marry Grover, her husband Grover Krantz. Grover Krantz is a nationally known anthropologist. He is a cryptoanthropologist. He has done a series of lectures all over America, and his studies of evolutionary anthropology, the evolution of man, and he is an outspoken supporter of Bigfoot. And he has done many highly notable lectures debating, yes, there is a Bigfoot, no, there's not a Bigfoot. He's the yes, there is a Bigfoot. In this picture, Grover is with one of his 2 Irish wolfhounds, big wolfhounds. When his wolfhounds die, and I'm afraid Irish wolfhounds do not live to a ripe old age, you know, he saves their skeletons. And when after he divorces Evelyn, and after he's had 2 other marriages, making 4 in all, he is diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and he dies. But he writes a will, and in his will, he wills his corpse to Knoxville, Tennessee, to the Body Farm. The Body Farm is one of 8 forensic body farms in America. You guys know about the body farms? You will your body to the body farm. They take your body, they lay it out under a car, or they lay it out in the top of a tree, or it's in a closed-in, fenced-in area next to the university hospital there. They carefully examine over time, based on the temperature, the weather, the humidity, the rain, they examine what happens to human bodies. As one of my professors, I'm proud to say, my anthropology professor in college is the creator of the first body farm, Dr. Bass. Dr. William Bass. He was a fabulous teacher and a funny dude. Who else would put bodies on display all over the side of a hillside? But they measure them and they test them and they check what kind of bugs have infiltrated them. And when you watch a CSI or any forensic show where they say, well, there's so-and-so bug, this body must have been here between 48 and 54 hours, that's because the evidence was collected at one of these body farms around America. There's a body farm in the desert, a body farm in the hills, a body farm in southern Florida, a body farm in Maine. Different climates, bodies react in different ways to different insects and stuff. So they have these testings, and he willed his body. And when he was reduced to nothing but bones, the bones were gathered up, placed with the bones of his 2 Irish wolfhounds, and given to the National Museum of Natural History to create this exhibit. Got to get out of the way so you can see that. Yes, that is Einstein's daughter/granddaughter's husband's, ex-husband's bones, always there with his favorite dog. There, okay. Questions and answers about Albert Einstein. There, yes. Yes, he's going to work. There was a scientist named Slizard that he had worked with many times, and they had done experiments and things together. And he and Slizard actually knew the German scientists who were working on the atomic projects in Germany, and he informed Einstein of what they were doing. And then Slizard wrote the letter to President Roosevelt that Einstein read through and co-signed, warning Roosevelt that the Germans were working on an atomic bomb, and if they developed this atomic bomb, it'd all be over, and we had to get it first. Yeah.
You guys can never hear about how close was Adolf Hitler and people from getting that bomb. Were they not on the cause?
Well, they realized that to develop the bomb, they had to have heavy water facilities, and purely by accident, in one of our bombing missions, we wiped out the Germans' heavy water production facilities, which when they found out, they went, because you can't make the stuff that blows up in a bomb if you don't have the heavy water. So it was almost, we managed to lengthen the time it would take to get the bomb, but we sort of did it by accident. But that's okay, we still did it. Other questions about the life of Albert Einstein? Anybody got something? Oh, I'm sorry, another question. Yeah. Yes, they took out his brain. Now, the condition the family had placed upon collecting the brain was it had to be used for serious scientific research, and the results of that research had to be published in prominent, significant journals. It wasn't going to be like the National Enquirer. It had to be like, JAMA or something. And that was what they were shooting for. Yeah.
Two questions.
Okay.
First, all of Einstein's escapades, the man is really busy, especially...
And I didn't touch on all of them.
Especially during the World War I era, which was ultimately a horrific time in Germany. How did he pull that off?
Well, in World War I, now he's working in the university system in Germany, and he does something actually that's a part of his public life that is actually very, very praiseworthy, as much as he was fooling around with Elsa and everybody. He also put together the International Coalition of Scientists for Peace, and he got like a dozen German top scientists to sign a paper urging a cessation to the war, and correlated it with an English scientist who also collected top scientists, and they produced a paper saying, here are these prominent scientists from various fields. We are against this war. There's got to be a better way to solve our problems. It's a waste of life, You can see how much effect that had. A bunch of intellectuals getting together to say how you should run things. Heaven forbid. He's going to spend most of his public career advocating for ways to do peace.
Larry, I also want to say that we need to make it clear that the war did not really touch the German homeland. And that's going to be part of the problem. After the war, they don't understand why they lost when they didn't see any damage.
That's true, because we didn't, in World War I, we did not sweep across, the Hindenburg Line and go sweeping across Germany like we did in World War II, where we're decimating cities.
Second question.
Yeah.
You noted early on that he was from a very extensive family in Germany. Were they ultimately caught up in the Holocaust?
Yes. As a Jewish family, there was, and this was more in connection with his sister Maya. Maya had some cousins that lived near her in Italy. And when she and her husband tried to leave Italy, and she ended up getting allowed to come to America, probably because Einstein was her brother, but her husband was not allowed to come here for whatever medical reason it was, and so he returned to his family in Switzerland. They had a cousin and a wife and 2 daughters that lived nearby, and they stayed. And of course, Mussolini's a fascist, and there was a lot of discomfort, but they continued on. But by 1943 or 44, it was no longer Mussolini's goons that were running things. It was now the SS. The Germans had taken over the control of Italy. And the pressure was on the Jewish families. And they missed the cousin, but they captured the wife and the 2 daughters. And these would be Einstein's family cousins. And they were executed. The father was when he discovered what happened to his family, he was spared and they all died. The next year, he committed suicide himself. He just couldn't stand. He felt he let him down. He should have been there when they were taken. So yes, they lost at least 4 members of the family in the Holocaust. I have not come across any records of the family in Germany. Well, I don't know. I cannot say they were wiped out. Some of them had come to America, but I would imagine as big a family as there was, most of them had not. And Einstein was definitely in trouble. When he left, when he refused to come back to Germany, he had a lovely home outside of Berlin on a little lake. That was his vacation home. And it was seized and turned into a German youth camp. And what he most, other than the loss of his sailboat that he liked to go out on the lake on, the thing that he grieved the most was he lost a parrot. He had his pet parrot at the lake house being taken care of by the staff at the lake house. And he lost his parrot. In fact, when he told this story in America, he got a box in the mail. And he opened the box, and there, wrapped in paper, was a parrot that somehow survived being wrapped in paper and put in a box in the mail with no holes punched or anything. Just a parrot in a box. And so he took this parrot, and it was with him for a long time after that. But, yeah, he lost his parrot and his sailboat. Yes? A descendant of Einstein's walking buddies on Randall Street. Yes. I made that up. Oh. Oh, well. It's the world we live in. What can I say? Yeah.
Thank you for a fascinating talk. Whatever happened to Evelyn?
Evelyn went on to, when she first divorced Krantz, she was in tough financial straits. And she actually talked in several talk shows. She talked about living sort of dumpster diving to survive for a while. But she moves in with her father. Now, this is also like the year he dies. So she moves in with his father, but then he dies. And so much for that. And she goes out on her own. She works as a shop clerk. She works as an assistant, like a citizen police assistant to the police in Berkeley, California. She has several odd jobs. And then she comes across these letters that had been written, the ones that reveal that Lisserl was born. She comes across those letters and parlays those into money. And she does a lawsuit against the University of Jerusalem, where in his will, Einstein willed his literary work to the university, to support the university in Israel. And she said, I don't see how a bobblehead doll is a literary work that they should be profiting from, that the descendants of Einstein should be, and you know, here I am, his granddaughter. He's got 5 great-grandchildren from Bernard. There are 5 great-grandchildren. I have their pictures if you want to see them. So she sues, and for an undisclosed amount, it is settled, and she is comfortable until she passes away. 1911, she passes away from a heart and diabetic. She had a problem with her heart and for diabetes, and she died of that at the age of 70, I believe. 2011. Anyway, and her estate when she died was valued at $1 million. So that being the case, I assume she got a good deal on her Einstein papers. Yeah.
That Einstein and Bonhoeffer's relatives worked together on the atomic bomb?
Well, in the First World War, Einstein had been horrified that one of his best friends had developed shells that fired mustard gas. And he could not believe that a great chemist like his friend would develop these horrible, nasty weapons that would cause such a horrible, miserable death as clouds of green smoke. And so the fact that he is considered sort of the father of the atom bomb, though he did not work on the bomb himself. He was not allowed to work on the bomb himself. He was considered an untrustworthy alien by the FBI who has like 20,000 pages on Albert Einstein. And the fact that he very likely was dating a Russian agent, that probably was not a bad idea to have him hands off. But so he only worked on theoretical aspects of atomic energy and all that, but not on actual bombs and construction. He wrote, one of my favorite quotes from him is that technology was advancing faster than our humanity, and we needed to let the humanity catch up with the technology. Yeah. Any other? Okay. And just by way of a flash, since I have it on here, here is his great-grandchild. There. He is a doctor born in 1955, so he's a year younger than me, and he's a surgeon in Los Angeles, does outpatient surgery. Here is his brother. His brother was born a couple of years later, concert violinist, lives in southern France. The next great-grandchild is born a few years after that, and he owns a furniture store in L.A. And there's the daughter, great-grandchildren. She lives in Switzerland, where she is a musician, and she's also the co-owner of a telemarketing company. And then there's yet another great-grandchild, but no matter how I looked, I couldn't find any pictures of him whatsoever, because as a rule, the Einstein direct descendants don't ever mention it, because they can be an Einstein, but they never say they are the descendants of Albert Einstein because of the burden that carries. You can be an Einstein, but if you're that Einstein, the expectations change. And so there are the kids there. And a lot of them have had kids since then too. There you go. All right. I do want to mention that right here on this stage, not this weekend, but the next weekend, March 8th and 9th, there is a writers' fair. They had a great writers' expo last year with local writers. On Saturday from 10 a.m. till 4:30, they're going to have a local author expo, various meetings in the various rooms, meeting local authors, Glennis Redmond, David Joy, Raquel Vasquez Gilliland, many others. You'll have a chance to talk to authors, get books signed. They'll all be here. It was a huge turnout. I helped moderate a meeting last year, and there was a huge turnout. It was very well attended, a great show. So just to put a pitch in, if you're interested in local writers, they will be here not this weekend, but the next weekend, Saturday and Sunday. There you go. Thank you all very much. We can use your help today packing up the chairs. So if you don't mind dragging chairs to the back to be stacked, that would be greatly appreciated.